My name is Maddie. I am 67 years old, and I'm about to die, not because of cancer, not because of some sudden accident, but because I have willingly lain down on this operating table, preparing to donate my kidney to my son. But just seconds before the anesthesia needle touched my skin, my 9-year-old grandson suddenly burst into the operating room, shouting a sentence that froze everyone in place. "Grandma! Dad doesn't have kidney disease. Mom is the one poisoning him." The entire surgical team was stunned. I lay there, my heart seeming to stop. And now, to understand why a child of only 9 had to scream those horrifying words, I have to tell you everything from the beginning. The story of how I, a mother, almost sacrificed my own life for a criminal scheme engineered by the very people in my own family. If you're listening to this story, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I truly want to know how far it has traveled. The story began 3 months ago on a sweltering afternoon in Jackson, Mississippi. That day, my daughter-in-law Janine walked into the kitchen and with a single sentence turned my life completely upside down. "Mother, the doctor said only your kidney is compatible. This is your responsibility. You have to save Cornell." I stood there, holding the rice pot in my hands, staring at Janine as if I'd just been slapped hard across the face. Not because of her words, but because of that look, cold, calculating, as if she wasn't pleading, but commanding. "Janine, you know I'd do anything for Cornell." My voice trembled. "But I need a little more time." "There is no more time, Mother." Janine cut me off, her voice sharp as a knife. "I can't lose my husband." With that, she turned her back and walked away, leaving me frozen in the middle of the kitchen, the sound of the spoon clattering on the cement floor still echoing. That was the first time in my life I felt fear right inside my own home, but that was only the beginning. Because after that came the late-night whispered phone calls, the unmarked bottles hurriedly hidden, the recording my little grandson accidentally found. All of it gradually led to a horrifying truth no one wanted to believe. And then finally, everything converged in that moment on the operating table. The moment I realized the most dangerous person isn't always a stranger, but sometimes the one sharing the pillow with your child. What happened in the operating room that day? Was Cornell saved? Did Janine pay for what she had done? And most importantly, did I survive to tell you all of this? Stay with me, because what's about to happen will make you rethink deeply whether you should place your full trust in your own family. I live in a small house on the outskirts of Jackson, Mississippi, the house Joe and I bought 40 years ago with the money from my vegetable stall at the market and his carpentry wages. Back then, we were young, poor, but full of hope. The house had only 2 bedrooms, a tiny living room, and a kitchen with a chipped porcelain sink that had been cracked for years. Now, the paint is peeling in many places, exposing the dull gray cement underneath. The roof sometimes leaks when it rains hard. I have to place plastic buckets in the corners to catch the water. And yet, this is still my home, the place where I raised 2 grown sons, where I cried, laughed, and lived through countless years. Joe, my husband, has been bedridden for more than 10 years. He sits in an old wheelchair Malcolm has repaired over and over again. The left wheel keeps jamming, and every time I push him out to the backyard for fresh air, it makes that steady creak sound. That sound has become part of my life, a reminder that for years I've been carrying the whole family on my shoulders. Joe barely speaks. In fact, almost nothing at all. Sometimes he just lets out a long, deep sigh, and his eyes drift off somewhere, looking into a distance I can't tell he still sees. One freezing winter night, I sat beside him, holding his dry, cold hand, and asked, "Are you tired of this life?" He only blinked, once, twice, then silence. I don't know if he heard me, if he understood what I said, or if I was only talking to myself, in that dark room where the wind seeping through the door crack sounded like the sigh of all the years gone by. Cornell, my eldest son, was once my greatest pride. Tall, broad-shouldered, with strong arms from years of construction work. When he was healthy, he would come home with a booming laugh that made our small house feel bigger. He'd wrap his arms around me from behind and ask, "Mom, what delicious thing are you cooking today?" Those memories now feel distant, like a dream. In recent years, Cornell began to weaken. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion. Working heavy construction, hauling cement, mixing mortar, standing under the sun from 6 in the morning to 6 at night, of course it wears you out. But then strange signs appeared. He grew paler, his skin taking on a sickly yellow hue. His eyes sank, with dark, heavy circles beneath them. Some mornings he stayed in the bathroom for a very long time. The water ran, but he hadn't come out yet. Once, I knocked on the door. "Cornell, are you okay?" Silence. Then his weak voice. "I'm fine, Mom. I'll be out soon." When he stepped out, his face was ashen. On the bathroom tiles, though he'd tried to wipe it, I could still see a smear of dark red blood. My heart froze. I clutched him, my voice shaking. "Cornell, what's wrong?" "Tell me, where does it hurt?" He only shook his head, forcing a smile, the kind of smile I know he uses to hide pain. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm probably just overworked. Don't think too much." But inside me, an alarm bell began to ring. Soft at first, then louder, persistent, impossible to ignore. Malcolm, my younger son, 26, is completely different from his brother. If Cornell is like the sun, bright, noisy, drawing every eye, then Malcolm is like the moon, quiet, humble, always there when you need him. He works as a plumber and electrician for households around Jackson. Malcolm rents a one-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from my house. He doesn't talk much. Many days he drops by, and we sit side by side for an hour without saying a word, and still it feels warm. Each visit, Malcolm brings something. Not expensive gifts, he doesn't have extra, but everyday things. A few oranges from the market, a still warm loaf of bread from the corner shop, or a bag of greens he knows I like. He steps in, sets the items down, scans the room. "Mom, why's the ceiling fan creaking like that?" Then he pulls out Joe's old metal toolbox, climbs the ladder, and fixes it. Without me asking. Without a word. Just does it. One afternoon, sunlight streaming through the window, Malcolm was replacing a shorted outlet in the kitchen. He turned to me, eyes serious. "Mom, don't work yourself to exhaustion. I don't want to see you worn out." His voice was deep, a little hoarse, but full of concern. I laughed, waving him off. "I'm still strong, Malcolm." 67, but I can handle a lot. Worry about your brother. He needs you more." Malcolm didn't smile. He only shook his head, bent down to tighten the screw, his shoulders giving that little shrug I know so well. He's worried, but doesn't want to say more. Janine came into our lives 5 years ago. Cornell met her at a cafe in downtown Jackson. That day he came home, eyes bright like a child with a gift. "Mom, I met an amazing woman. She's beautiful, smart, and she really cares about me." I was happy for him, thought he'd finally found happiness. Janine is beautiful, there's no denying that. About 5'6", fair, smooth skin, long, glossy hair, neatly elegant clothes, simple dresses, moderate heels. She spoke gently, calmly, making people feel at ease. The first time she came over, she brought a box of cake. "Mom, I bought sponge cake. Cornell said you like it." I was touched. Thought, this daughter-in-law is thoughtful. After the wedding, Cornell and Janine moved in with Joe and me. The small house became more crowded, but I didn't mind. I thought a big family is a blessing. Janine took meticulous care of Cornell. Every morning she got up early, made coffee, prepared breakfast, reminded him, "Take your medicine, okay?" She kept strict track of his schedule. She held the key to the medicine cabinet. Whenever Cornell needed something, she opened the cabinet, measured the dose, handed it to him with a glass of water. "Don't worry, Mom," she'd say. "I'll take good care of him." The neighbors praised. "Mrs. Maddie is lucky to have such a good daughter-in-law." I believed it too, truly believed it. But sometimes, just sometimes, when she didn't know I was watching, I caught a different look, cold and calculating, as if behind the sweet smile was a mind measuring something I couldn't quite grasp. One night near 11, I got up to use the bathroom. Passing the hallway, I heard Janine on the phone out back. I stopped. The dim moonlight poured through the window, casting her shadow, standing with her back turned, phone to ear, her voice low but urgent. "Don't worry. Everything's going according to plan. Just a few more months." My heart pounded. I stepped out. "Janine, who are you calling so late?" She startled, her face briefly pale. Then she flashed a flawless, bright smile. "A friend's upset. I'm comforting her." "Go to sleep, Mom. It's late." I nodded, went back inside. But inside me, a seed of suspicion had fallen. Small, faint, but it was there. Isaiah, my 9-year-old grandson, is the rare joy in these heavy days. He has big round eyes like Cornell when he was little, and a radiant smile that could melt any sorrow. Every afternoon after school, Isaiah runs home with his small backpack to this very house where the whole family now lives, and sits in the backyard playing with the plastic cars I bought at the flea market. He tells me about school, friends, harmless mischiefs. I listen, feeling less lonely. But sometimes, Isaiah asks questions that freeze me. One afternoon, sunlight slanting through the mango leaves, he looked up at me, eyes clear but puzzled. "Grandma, Mom calls on the phone a lot at night. I hear her talk about medicine, but I don't understand." I was sweeping the yard. My broom halted midair. I forced a smile, stroked his head. "She's probably talking to the doctor about medicine for your dad." "Don't think too much, sweetheart." Isaiah nodded, but didn't smile. He bent back down to play, eyes holding a worry far too big for a 9-year-old. I turned back to sweep, my hand trembling slightly. If right now you've ever felt that sense something is wrong in your own home, but you have no proof, leave a dot in the comments. As for me, I was about to touch the truth, and it hurt more than I imagined. That day was scorching hot. Sweat ran down my back as I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner. I was frying rice. The scent of crispy grains mixed with fish sauce and fried shallots filled the air. Janine walked in. No good afternoon, no smile. She stood right at the kitchen doorway, arms folded across her chest, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Mother, the doctor said only your kidney is compatible. This is your responsibility. You must save my husband." The spoon slipped from my hand with a thunk into the pan. A few grains of rice splattered onto my apron. I looked at her, my mouth opening but no words coming out. I tried to find a trace of warmth in her eyes, a bit of empathy, a bit of understanding, but saw only cold determination, almost a command. "Janine, you know I'd do anything for Cornell." My voice a whisper, trembling, my throat dry. "But I need a little more time." "There is no more time, Mother." Janine cut me off, her voice unwavering. "Cornell needs it now. You're his mother. You can't refuse." With that, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing amid the smell of fried rice and suffocating silence. I still held the spoon, feeling myself pushed into a dark, narrow corner with no way out. From the living room, Joe's wheelchair creaked. Creak, creak, like an invisible clock counting down my time. That night I couldn't sleep. Lying on the old bed, the one I've shared for 40 years, I stared up at the ceiling in the dark. Moonlight slipped through the curtain slits, drawing faint streaks across the wall. The steady ticking of the wall clock felt like tiny hammers tapping against my temples. I thought about Janine's words. "You must save him." Not, "Can you help him?" or "Are you willing?" But "You must." An order, not a plea. I turned over, the bed creaking. I shut my eyes, trying to sleep, but Janine's face kept appearing. Cold, resolute, without a flicker of hesitation. From the next room, Cornell and Janine's room, separated only by a thin wall, I heard whispers. At first I thought I imagined it. But no, Janine's voice was clear, low, clipped, sharp as a knife. Yes, everything is going according to plan. That old woman won't dare refuse. After the transplant, we'll have all the data. My heart stalled. I sat up, hands trembling. Data? What data? I wanted to rush over, fling the door open and demand an answer. But I was afraid. A numbing fear. Afraid that if I asked, I'd have to face a truth I couldn't bear. In the end, I just lay still, pulling the blanket to my chin, shivering in the dark. The next morning, I got up at 5:30 as usual. The sky was still dim, streetlights casting a pale yellow glow through the window. I went to the kitchen to boil water for tea, a faint scent of mint rising. The kettle bubbled, steam rising like the tangled thoughts in my head. Janine came in. She wore a white nightgown, hair down, but her eyes were sharp, as if she'd been awake for hours. "Good morning, Mother," she said softly, heading straight to the fridge for a carton of milk. "Did you sleep well?" "Well, dear," I lied, my voice hoarse. Janine poured milk into a glass, then pulled a small blue pill from her pocket. She dropped it into the milk, stirred, and carried it into Cornell's room. I stood there watching. What pill was that? A few minutes later, she came out with the empty glass. She washed it thoroughly, scrubbing over and over as if erasing every trace. "Mother," she said gently, "are you free to go to the hospital with Cornell today? The doctor wants to meet the family to discuss his condition." I nodded, but inside me, a block of ice was growing. That afternoon, Janine and I took Cornell to the University of Mississippi Medical Center. Cornell sat in a wheelchair. He was too weak to walk. His face was pale, lips cracked and dry. I pushed the chair, my heart tightening every time I looked down at his bowed head. Janine walked beside us, carrying the bag, her steps confident, as if everything was still under her control. We entered the consulting room. Dr. Evans, a middle-aged man with graying hair and metal-framed glasses, sat behind the desk. He flipped through the file, then looked up. "Mr. Cornell's condition is very serious. His kidneys have deteriorated to a dangerous level. Without a transplant soon, I'm afraid." He left the sentence hanging, but I understood. "We've done the tests," he continued, "and you, the patient's mother, are the most compatible donor." Janine immediately cut in. "Yes, Mother's ready." "Aren't you, Mother?" She turned to me, her eyes not asking but ordering. I swallowed hard and nodded weakly. "Yes, I'll do it." Dr. Evans noted. "Good. We'll schedule the necessary tests for you." Outside the consultation room, I told Janine, "You go ahead. I want to go up to Cornell's room for a bit." She looked at me, hesitated briefly, then nodded. "Yes, Mother." I pushed Cornell up to the 3rd floor, inpatient care. In his room, I helped him lie down. He panted, cold sweat beading on his forehead. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry for making you worry." "Don't say that, son." I held his hand. On the bedside table, I saw a glass of water and a few pills. I picked up one small blue pill with no label. My heart pounded. What was this? I secretly slipped the pill into my pocket. Then I sought out the duty doctor, a young man around 30, crisp white coat. "Doctor," I asked, my voice trembling, "has the hospital prescribed any new medication for Cornell? A small blue pill with no label?" He checked the file and shook his head. "No, ma'am. There's nothing like that on his treatment list." The answer felt like a punch to the stomach. I stood frozen in the hallway, the PA announcements echoing while my mind went blank. Janine had lied. That pill wasn't from the hospital. So what was it? Late afternoon, when I returned home, Malcolm was at the door holding his toolbox, shirt smeared with grease. "Mom, I heard you're about to donate your kidney to him," he said, tense. "Are you sure?" "Son, I have to." "Your brother." "Mom," Malcolm cut in, his voice shaking. "I have to tell you something." He pulled me inside, closed the door. From his pocket, he took out his phone, opened a photo. A blurry but clear enough shot. Janine standing in the hospital parking lot, handing a small bag to a man in a black jacket and baseball cap. "I took this yesterday. Malcolm said. I followed her because I suspected something. That man gave her an envelope. I couldn't hear what they said, but Mom, I'm sure something's wrong. I stared at the photo, hands trembling. Did you hear anything? Malcolm shook his head. No, I was too far. But I'm scared. He didn't finish, but his eyes spoke for him. I dropped into a chair, the floor feeling like it was collapsing beneath me. If you've ever had a small detail suddenly click everything into place, a message, a photo, a strange habit, comment clicked. For me, the photo in the parking lot was only the first piece. The others were about to surface, and they would hurt. That night, when everyone was asleep, Isaiah quietly knocked on my door. Grandma, I have something to tell you. I opened the door. Isaiah stepped in, pale, clutching an old cell phone. Grandma, I found this in Mom's drawer. He unlocked it, pressed play. A recording played, Janine's voice, sharp as a blade. After the transplant, the test results will be perfect. Don't worry, that old woman won't dare refuse. These results are worth 100 times more. We'll have enough money to wash all the dirty profits clean. I dropped the phone onto the bed. My hands shook uncontrollably. I looked at Isaiah, my 9-year-old grandson, tears streaming down his cheeks. I don't know what it means, he choked, but I thought you should know. I hugged him tight. You're so brave. But inside, I wanted to scream. Test results? Money laundering? What was Janine doing? The next morning, while Janine was out shopping, Malcolm and I slipped into her room. We opened the medicine cabinet, the small one she always kept locked. Malcolm pried the lock with a screwdriver. Inside were dozens of unlabeled bottles, blue pills, white pills, yellow pills, none with labels. Malcolm took one bottle, opened it, sniffed. This smell doesn't seem like normal medicine. He pulled out his phone, snapping photos. Suddenly, the sound of a key turning at the front door. Janine was back. We hurriedly shut the cabinet and ran to the living room. My heart pounded. Janine walked in, eyes darting between us, her voice suspicious. What are you and Malcolm doing? Nothing, dear. I tried to stay calm. We were just talking. But she didn't believe it. She went straight to the room, opened the cabinet to check. When she came out, her face was pale but her voice icy. Who touched my medicine cabinet? Malcolm stood up. I did. And I want to know what those drugs are, Janine sneered. My husband's medicine. You have no right to snoop, no labels, no doctor's prescription. Malcolm stepped closer. What are you giving my brother? Enough, Janine snapped. Get out of my house. This is my mother's house, Malcolm shot back. I rushed between them, my voice shaking. Please, stop, both of you. But no one listened. That afternoon, Malcolm secretly took one of the blue pills and handed it to me. Mom, I'll get this tested. I have a friend at the lab who can do a quick check. That night, Malcolm called, his voice trembling. Mom, the results are back. The pill contains a toxin, a chemical that causes chronic kidney failure. Mom, she's poisoning him. I sank to the floor. The phone slipped from my hand. The final pieces clicked into place. Cornell wasn't sick naturally. Janine was poisoning my son. They wanted to use the transplant to get data, likely for illegal drug experiments. And me, I was just a tool in their plan. I held my head, tears streaming. Cornell, my son, being harmed by his own wife. The night before the surgery, I sat in the small room at the old wooden table. The oil lamp flickered, casting dim yellow light on the trembling lines of my will. I wrote that the little house would go to Malcolm. A few precious belongings would be for Isaiah. Each stroke felt like a cut. I didn't know if I'd survive the operation, but I wanted to be ready. Joe sat motionless in his wheelchair in the corner, looking at me with empty eyes. I saw his hand tremble slightly, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. I looked up, tears spilling. Joe, I have to do the right thing, don't I? I have to save Cornell. He didn't speak, only blinked, and 2 tears rolled down his gaunt face. I folded the will, placed it into the old wooden box, the one where I kept our wedding photo and memories. Outside, rain poured down. The sound on the eaves merged with my quiet sobs. At dawn, still dark, the ambulance arrived. I lay on the stretcher, clutching my small cloth bag. Malcolm ran after me, shouting, "Mom, don't do this!" But I didn't turn back, because I believed only by entering that operating room could the truth be exposed. And I had to know the truth, even if it killed me. That early morning, the sky was still dark, fog wrapped around the small streets leading into the hospital. I lay on the gurney in the ambulance, eyes fixed on the ceiling, my mind blank. The siren wailed, "Woo, woo, woo," shrill and urgent, like an alarm for the disaster drawing near. But I wasn't afraid anymore. My whole body was numb, from flesh to thought. I clenched the small cloth bag holding a change of clothes and the handkerchief Joe gave me on our wedding day. The letters M and J had faded with the years, but still lay there, like a fine thread tying me to my life. Streetlights slid past the little window of the vehicle. Gold, then dark, then gold again. Like slivers of memory flickering through my head. Cornell as a child, his laughter, the days he faded. And Janine, always Janine, with a sweet smile hiding something I didn't dare to name. A nurse sat beside me, took my blood pressure and asked questions, but I barely heard. All I heard was my heart pounding, thud, 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 like a drum roll before an execution. Today, I would lie on the operating table. Today, very possibly, I would not wake up. But inside me, there was still a small part, hard as a pebble, whispering, "No, the truth must be exposed. Even if I die, the truth must live." The ambulance stopped at the gate of the University of Mississippi Medical Center. They rolled my gurney down. The wheels squeaked over the tiles, familiar as Joe's wheelchair, making me shiver. The hospital corridor was long and empty. The fluorescent lights were so bright I had to squint. The smell of disinfectant was thick. Alcohol, betadine, the smell of a place where life and death stand side by side. Janine walked close behind. Her heels clicked. Tack, tack, tack. Like a cold counting beat. You must do it. You must save him. You have no choice. Don't worry, Mother. Her voice light as air but freezing cold. After the surgery, everything will be fine. I didn't turn back. I didn't want to see the triumphant smile I knew was on her lips. At the reception area, Janine's parents were already there. Mr. Porter wore an old gray suit pressed razor sharp. Mrs. Porter had on a red dress, heavy makeup, hair curled. They looked like they were going to a party, not waiting on a life-or-death operation. "Maddie," Mrs. Porter clapped, beaming a fake bright smile. "We came early to encourage you. Today is a big day. A big day." I laughed bitterly inside. I might die today, and they called it big? Mr. Porter put a hand on my shoulder, heavy as a weight. "You're doing the right thing, Maddie. Our family will remember this sacrifice, family." The word lashed my face like a whip. I didn't belong to their family. I was a tool. They allowed me to see Cornell before the operating room. The nurse wheeled me into the prep room, a small space, white and cold like a drawer. Cornell lay on the bed, thin arms bruised with needle marks, IV lines in both sides. His face was paper pale, eyes sunken, lips cracked. Seeing me, he tried to force a fragile smile. "Mom, thank you. I know you're scared, but I need you." Each word sounded dredged up from the bottom of his lungs. I took his hand. It was cold to the bone, not the cold of weather, but the cold of someone drifting away. "Cornell, I'll do everything to make you well," I said, my voice trembling so much I wasn't sure how much he even heard. I looked deep into his eyes, once bright in childhood, now dulled by exhaustion. I wanted to ask, "Do you know?" "Do you know what your wife is doing?" I didn't dare. I was afraid his heart would shatter. Suddenly, the door burst open. Malcolm rushed in, hands still stained with grease, shirt soaked in sweat, breath heaving. "Mom!" he shouted, desperate. "Don't do it!" "I'm begging you." He grabbed my shoulders, eyes red, voice choked. "Mom, the test results are in." "The medicine contains poison. My sister-in-law is poisoning him, and they want to use this surgery to get data for illegal trials. You can't donate. You'll die." Malcolm's words struck like lightning. I looked at my quiet, steady younger son, now begging me with everything he had. I wanted to say, "All right, I won't." I wanted to jump up and run out of this place. But Cornell lay there, looking at me with the last scraps of hope. How could I leave him? I placed my hand over Malcolm's, squeezed gently, and shook my head. "Son, I have to." "No!" Malcolm screamed. "Don't you understand? They're tricking you." Nurses hurried over, began wheeling me away. Malcolm was held back, still struggling, his cries tearing at me. "Mom, listen to me." That sound chased me down the corridor, fading, then gone. They pushed me through a long, windowless white hallway, lit only by fluorescent lights stretching across each yard of floor. The gurney wheels rolled, lop, 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 like an invisible countdown. The disinfectant smell grew thicker. I could smell betadine, alcohol, the rubber of gloves, scents I would carry all my life. The PA crackled. "Operating room 3, prepare for kidney transplant." "Dr. Evans, to operating room 3. My heart lurched. In the changing area, a middle-aged nurse with tired eyes helped me into the gown, cap, and mask. "You'll be fine," she said, trying to comfort me. But I heard a hesitation at the end. The thin green patient gown was cold as a shroud. I glanced at the mirror, a 67-year-old woman, gaunt, pale-faced, dark hollows under her eyes. I wondered, is this the last image of myself? A short roll later brought us to the OR doors, and right before the glass, I saw Janine and Mrs. Porter talking to a man. Black jacket, baseball cap pulled low, exactly like the man in the photo Malcolm took. Janine handed him a thick brown envelope. He opened it, glanced, nodded, then passed her a thinner envelope. Janine took it, smiling the satisfied smile of someone who'd just closed a lucrative deal. My heart froze. They were exchanging money. They were trading. My body? I wanted to scream, to demand a stop. But my arms and legs were strapped down. I could only widen my eyes and watch the scene slide away as the OR doors closed. The operating room was cold as a freezer. A draft from the air conditioner blasted my face and made me shake uncontrollably. The surgical light, a giant ring, blinding white, poured straight over me. Was this the light at the end of the tunnel? Dr. Evans stood beside me, in green scrubs and mask, only his stern eyes visible. "Mrs. Jones, everything is ready. Just relax. We'll take good care of you." I nodded, my body stiff. A nurse placed electrodes on my chest, secured my arm, checked the IV lines. The monitor beeped, beeped, beeped. Fast, but steady, hammering at my heart. Through the glass, Janine stood with her arms crossed, giving a slight nod like a signal. "Do it. Sign it. Don't complicate things." A nurse held out the consent form, the final page. I took the pen, my hand shaking so hard the signature bled and blotted. As the tip touched down, it felt like I was signing my own death sentence. I thought of Joe, probably sitting alone, not knowing his wife was about to leave. I thought of Malcolm, surely still crying himself hoarse somewhere in the corridor. I thought of Isaiah, the little grandchild who'd been so brave while I was not. And I thought of Cornell, the son I believed I was saving, though perhaps I'd been deceived. The doctor prepared the anesthesia syringe. The clear liquid glinted under the light. "You'll feel a little sleepy," he said. "Let's count down from 10. The needle touched the vein, a wave of cold spreading. 10, I began, my voice shaking. 9, 8. The sounds receded, the images dimmed. 7, so this is the end. 6, perhaps I will never wake up. 5. If you're still here, leave A so I know you can hear every beat of this heart. What comes next is a small explosion that will upend everything. Don't look away." Right then, when my consciousness was about to wink out, "Woo!" a violent crash shook the room. The OR door flew open, hinges screeching. Through the haze of anesthesia, I heard a child's voice, hard as steel. "Grandma!" "I have to tell everyone why my dad really needs your kidney. Isaiah, my grandson, 9 years old, charging into the operating room like a small angel sent to save my life." The anesthesia was seeping through me, a heavy, warm sensation pulling me down into a bottomless abyss. My eyelids weighed a ton, my limbs tingled, my consciousness fading like mist. But the door slamming open, and Isaiah's voice shot through my spine like an electric jolt, yanking me out of the narcotic fog. I forced my eyes open. Everything blurred. The blinding surgical light spun into hazy circles. And in that glow, I saw my grandson, Isaiah, 9 years old, sneakers caked with mud, wrinkled school uniform, his small chest heaving from running too fast. His hand gripped an old phone with a cracked screen as if it were the only weapon he had. Behind him, a panicked nurse gave chase. "Kid!" "You can't be in here. God, someone stop him." But Isaiah didn't stop. He ran straight toward me, his big round eyes wet with tears yet burning with determination, a resolve far bigger than his age. "Grandma!" His voice shook but rang so clearly it froze the entire room. "I have to tell everyone why my dad really needs your kidney." His words detonated like a bomb in the operating room. I held my breath, or tried to through the wave of anesthesia. My heart pounded wildly. The monitor went beep, 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 faster, more urgent, like it might explode. The entire OR fell into absolute silence. A surgeon dropped a clamp. The metal struck the tile with a clang, a sharp slice that shattered the stillness. Dr. Evans turned, raising his hand. His voice was low but decisive. "Stop everything. Let the boy speak." He glanced at me, then at Isaiah. "What do you have? Say it now." On the other side of the glass, Janine jerked up as if electrocuted. She hammered the door frantically, making the pain thud, 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 thud. "Don't listen to him!" she shrieked, voice cracking. "He's just a child! He's being used!" But her own voice had splintered, her face blanched, both hands shaking uncontrollably. There was no cold control left in her eyes. Only the naked panic of someone watching her secret ripped open. Mrs. Porter clawed her daughter's shoulder. "Hold it together!" "Don't let them see you panic." Too late. Everyone had seen. Isaiah didn't look at his mother. He looked only at me, eyes red, tears streaming, but lit with resolve. With his small trembling hand he pressed play on the old phone. A voice sounded, through the tiny speaker, yet chillingly clear, Janine's voice, whispered but sharp as a blade. "After the transplant, the test results will be perfect. Don't worry, that old woman won't dare refuse. These results are worth 100 times more. We'll have enough data to sell the drug overseas." The room exploded in silence. My blood turned to ice, even as the anesthetic flowed in my veins. I wanted to sit up, to scream, but my body felt frozen. Dr. Evans snapped his head up, eyes wide, with horror and fury both. "Stop!" His voice was as sharp as a scalpel. "Stop everything right now!" A nurse immediately pulled the anesthesia needle from my arm. The clear solution dripped to the floor. Plink, plink, plink. Like drops of time just stolen back. The others stood stock still, staring at one another in shock. If at this point you see the truth emerging from the dark, leave A in the comments. What follows will strip away every shell, and there will be no turning back. From behind the glass, Janine screamed herself hoarse. No! That's not true. The boy is lying. Malcolm put him up to it. Don't believe them. But her voice was breaking, like a drowning person thrashing for air. Isaiah drew a breath, still looking at me. I also have a video, Grandma. This is when my mom and my grandparents talked about selling the drug. He swiped and played the video. The image was grainy, but clear enough. Janine and Mrs. Porter in the hospital parking lot under dim yellow lights. They exchanged envelopes with a man in a black jacket and a baseball cap. Mrs. Porter's voice came through, cold and clipped, without a trace of hesitation. After this surgery, we'll have enough patient data to prove the drug's efficacy. Data from a transplant is extremely valuable. The money the international organization pays will change everything. No one will know. That old woman thinks she's just saving her son. Janine's sneer in the video. Yes, Mother. Everything is going according to plan. I lay still, eyes wide on the ceiling, but inside my head, thunder roared. The tears came on their own. I didn't stop them. I let them run, so betrayal, pain, rage, and relief could all surge through me. They had deceived me. They had nearly killed me. No, worse. They wanted to turn me into a test subject. Dr. Evans's face went ashen. He turned to the surgical team, voice tight with suppressed anger. This is no longer an operation. This is a crime scene. Call the police. Immediately, a nurse sprinted off, rubber clogs slapping the floor. The others looked at one another. One clapped a hand over her mouth, sobbing. Another shook his head heavily. Hospital security arrived in minutes. 2 large men in blue uniforms. They headed straight for Janine, Mr. Porter, and Mrs. Porter. Janine backed away, shaking her head wildly. No! Don't! You don't understand. I'm innocent. I only wanted to save my husband. One security officer held out a hand. Mrs. Janine Porter, you are being detained on suspicion of poisoning and illegal drug trafficking. Please cooperate. No! Let me go! Janine thrashed, but they already had her restrained. Mrs. Porter shrieked, swinging her cane. Touch my daughter and we will sue! We'll shut this hospital down. The second officer stepped in, blocking her. You are also a suspected accomplice. Please remain silent. Mr. Porter rushed forward, voice shaking. This is a misunderstanding. We're good people. We only wanted to— You have the right to remain silent, the officer said, voice cold as steel. Anything you say can be used against you. Malcolm appeared at the end of the corridor, face flushed, eyes blazing. He didn't speak. He walked straight to Janine as they held her, and before anyone could react, crack! A thunderous slap. The sound echoed. Janine's face snapped to the side, a livid welt rising. How dare you! Malcolm growled, voice shaking with rage. You poisoned my brother. You tried to kill my mother. You're a monster! Mrs. Porter screeched. Hit my daughter? You— Malcolm jabbed a finger at Janine's face, slicing through her words. What did you give my brother? What did you do to Cornell? Speak! Janine clutched her cheek, tears spilling. But there was no remorse in her eyes, only the panic of exposure and the fury of being struck. You're insane! She turned to security. He assaulted me! Arrest him! The officers stood unmoved, looking at her with disgust. Dr. Evans stepped out, voice icy. Take them to a separate room and hold them until the police arrive. No one leaves. In about 20 minutes, Jackson police arrived. 2 officers in deep blue uniforms, armed and carrying cuffs, went straight to Janine. Janine Porter, you are under arrest on suspicion of poisoning, conspiracy to commit murder, and illegal drug trafficking. You have the right to remain silent. I'm innocent, Janine thrashed. I'm being framed. Malcolm and the boy made it up. No one answered. They cuffed her and led her away. Mr. and Mrs. Porter were cuffed as well. Mr. Tom Porter, Mrs. Linda Porter. You are under arrest for complicity in drug trafficking and conspiracy to defraud. Slander! Mrs. Porter screamed, her cane clattering. "We have lawyers! We will—" Her voice fractured, fading as they were taken down the hall. The click of handcuffs, the scrape of shoes on tile, the door closing. Silence. When the commotion subsided, Dr. Evans came back to me. He pulled down his mask, revealing a tired but resolute face. "Mrs. Jones, we've canceled the operation. Cornell will be moved to alternative treatment, dialysis, and a new medication protocol. You don't need to sacrifice yourself. You've done enough." I looked at him, tears running down my cheeks. "Doctor, my son, will he be all right?" He gave a slight nod. "Cornell will be all right. As soon as the toxin is stopped and he's treated properly, he'll recover. And you just escaped death." I nodded, said nothing more. Malcolm ran in, dropped to his knees beside me, gripping my hand. "You still have me, Mom. I'll protect you." I promise. I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of that rough palm. "You are my pride." Isaiah rushed in too, threw his arms around me, sobbing. "Grandma, I was so scared. I was afraid I was too late." I held him, smoothed his hair. "You saved me. You're my hero." 2 days after what happened in the operating room, Cornell was much more lucid. The doctors had stopped all the medications Janine had forced him to take and started a detox regimen. His skin gradually regained color, his eyes no longer sunken like before. But when Dr. Evans and the police stepped into the room to tell the truth, I saw something inside him shatter. I sat by the bed, holding his hand. Dr. Evans sat across from us, his voice low and careful. "Mr. Cornell, we tested the medications your wife gave you. They contain a toxin that causes chronic kidney failure, commonly used in illegal medical trials. Janine has been giving it to you for at least 2 years. Cornell looked at the doctor, his mouth opening without a sound. He turned to me, eyes red, bewildered. "Mom, is it true?" I nodded, tears spilling over. "My son, I'm sorry. I should have realized sooner." "No," Cornell's voice broke. "It can't be. Janine, my wife, she said she loved me." A middle-aged female officer looked at him with sympathy and added, "Mr. Cornell, we've investigated. Janine and her family work for an international drug trafficking organization. They needed real patient data to prove the drug's efficacy before selling it on the black market. You were their test case, and your mother's transplant would have been the clinching proof." Cornell closed his eyes, his hands gripping the bed sheet until his knuckles turned white. Tears ran down his gaunt face. 5 years. 5 years of marriage. Was all of it a lie? I held him tight like when he was little, and fell down. But this time the wound was far deeper, where no bandage could reach. "My son," I whispered, choked. "I'm sorry." "I didn't protect you." "No, Mom." Cornell hugged me back. "I was the fool. I let her deceive me. I almost got you killed." We cried in each other's arms, mother and son in the stark white hospital room, the steady beeping of machines, the sting of disinfectant sharp in our noses. A few days later, the story was front-page news across Mississippi. Drug trafficking ring busted at University of Mississippi Medical Center. Woman poisons husband to harvest trial data. 67-year-old mother nearly dies in dark medical plot. I didn't read the papers. I didn't want to see Janine's face, her bright smile in the wedding photo, next to the accusatory headlines. Malcolm did. He brought the paper home and pointed things out to me. "Mom, they dug deep. Janine and her family are tied to at least 12 cases in other states. Some people died, some were permanently injured. They've been doing this for years." I stared at the black lines of print, a chill running down my spine. Cornell wasn't the only victim, and I wasn't the only mother who almost got fooled. If you're still with me here, leave A in the comments. Right after this, we enter the courtroom, where justice speaks and pain is given a name. Isaiah came home with me. Janine was arrested, Cornell was still hospitalized, and I petitioned for temporary custody. In the first days, Isaiah was very quiet. No toy cars, no smiles. He sat in the backyard, hugging his knees, staring off. One afternoon, I sat beside him and laid a hand on his small shoulder. "Sweetheart, what are you thinking about?" Isaiah looked up, eyes red. "Grandma, is my mom a bad person?" The question drilled into my heart. I hugged him, my voice shaking. "My child, your mother did something wrong. Very wrong. But that doesn't make you bad. You are the bravest child I know. You saved me. You saved your dad. You are a hero." "But why did she do it?" His tears streamed. "Doesn't she love Dad?" I didn't know what to say, because I didn't understand it either. How could someone poison the very person she vowed to love all her life? "Sweetheart, sometimes adults do things even they can't explain. But it isn't your fault. Do you hear me? It isn't your fault." Isaiah nodded. I knew the wound in his heart would take a long time to heal. 3 months later, the trial was held at the Jackson County Courthouse. I, Cornell, Malcolm, and Isaiah were all present. We sat in the victim's row, facing the defense table where Janine, Mr. Porter, and Mrs. Porter sat with their attorneys. Janine was gaunt, hair disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. Looking at Cornell, she tried to smile, a pleading smile through tears. "Honey, I'm sorry. I didn't want to. I was forced." But Cornell didn't look up. His hands were clenched. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s with a crisp, sharp voice, presented the evidence: recordings, videos, lab results, statements from the doctors, and from Isaiah. When Isaiah took the stand, before a packed courtroom, his voice trembled yet rang clear. "I saw Mom give Dad strange medicine. Dad said it was from the doctor, but I saw her hide the bottle. I heard her on the phone talking about selling data. I was scared. I didn't know who to tell. When Grandma was about to go into surgery, I knew I had to speak." The courtroom fell silent. Some people wiped tears. The judge, an elderly man with silver hair, pronounced sentence. Janine Porter, 25 years for poisoning, conspiracy to commit murder, and illegal drug trafficking. Tom Porter and Linda Porter, 20 years each for complicity. Mrs. Porter screamed, "Unfair!" "We're innocent." No one answered. They were escorted out. Janine looked back at Cornell one last time, tears streaming, but Cornell did not look at her. 6 months after the trial, life slowly settled into rhythm. Cornell recovered well. He didn't need a transplant, just regular dialysis and medication. He returned to work, not heavy lifting anymore, but as a site supervisor. Malcolm still lived nearby and stopped by often. He had a girlfriend now, Sarah, a nurse he met at the hospital. Isaiah lived with me. Cornell petitioned the court to grant me permanent custody. He laughed again, raced toy cars all over the yard. Sometimes he still went still, eyes far away, but the light had returned to them. Joe was still in the wheelchair, but after the ordeal, I felt him more present. He looked at me longer, sometimes squeezed my hand very gently, as if he had come back, not fully, but in a way I could feel. One night, I sat in the backyard under the moonlight. Isaiah slept in his room. Joe slept in his wheelchair in the living room. The house was quiet. I opened my old journal, the one I've written in for 40 years, and penned the final lines. Blood doesn't always make a family. Sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, shows you who truly deserves to be called your own. I lost much: trust, innocence, a daughter-in-law I once cherished. But I found something more important: myself. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is facing the truth even while trembling. Isaiah taught me that. Malcolm taught me that. And Cornell, though wounded, taught me that real love is not blind trust, but seeing the cracks and still choosing to stay. I am Maddie Jones. I am 67, and I am alive. That's all I need. I closed the journal, set down the pen, and listened to the crickets and the wind through the mango leaves. Looking up at the clear, star-strewn sky, I felt a peace I hadn't known in a long time. The storm had passed. I was still here, and I was stronger than ever. The story you just heard is true. Though names and places have been changed to protect the identities of those involved, I'm not telling it so you can judge, but so you will remember. Sometimes, the most dangerous person isn't a stranger on the street, but the one lying next to you. Sometimes, your kindness is exploited. That doesn't mean you stop being kind, it just means you must be wiser. And most importantly, if something feels wrong, even if it's only a faint hunch, listen to your intuition. It might save your life. If you were me, what would you do? Stay silent to keep the peace, or stand up to face the truth no matter how painful? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Every story shared is a candle lit for someone coming after. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next videos. Thank you for staying till the end. It saves not only my story, but perhaps someone else who's lost their way.